Okay, you probably think owning a football club is about winning. You buy the club, you hire the best manager, you sign the best players, and if everything goes right, you lift a trophy at the end of the season. That's the story every fan believes, and it's the story most owners let the public believe too. But if you actually looked at the balance sheet of almost any major football club, you'd notice something that doesn't fit that story at all. Most clubs lose money on football. Not occasionally, most years. Wages alone can eat up 70, 80, sometimes over 100% of a club's entire revenue. Transfer fees disappear into deals that may never be recouped. And yet, billionaires keep lining up to buy these clubs anyway, often paying far more than any reasonable football business would ever be worth. That contradiction is the whole story. Football clubs are not really valued as football businesses. They're valued as something else entirely. And once you see what that something else is, you'll never watch a match the same way again. Start with the obvious question. If a club loses money every year, why would anyone want to own one? The answer begins with what a football club actually is, underneath the shirts and the stadium chants. A football club is a media company that happens to produce content in the form of 90 minutes of live, unscripted drama every week. And live, unscripted drama is one of the most valuable things in the entire entertainment industry, because almost nobody records it and watches it later. People watch football live, which means broadcasters will pay enormous sums to be the ones showing it as it happens. This is where the real revenue engine of modern football lives: broadcasting rights. In England, the Premier League sells its domestic and international broadcasting rights in a collective package worth billions of pounds per 3-year cycle, then distributes that money across all 20 clubs. Even the club that finishes dead last in the league still receives a broadcasting payment worth well over $100 million. That single fact reshapes the entire industry. It means a club doesn't need to win anything to receive a massive, guaranteed check every single year, just for being a member of the league. Compare that to almost any other business. A restaurant that serves terrible food goes bankrupt. A football club that finishes last still gets paid like a mid-sized company's entire annual revenue, purely for holding a seat at the table. That seat, the membership itself, is one of the most valuable assets in world sports. And it's an asset most fans never think about because it never appears on a scoreboard. Ticket sales, the thing most fans assume is the main source of income, are actually one of the smaller pieces of the puzzle for big clubs. Match day revenue, tickets, concessions, merchandise sold in the stadium, typically makes up somewhere around 15 to 20% of total revenue for a top club. Broadcasting and commercial deals dwarf it. A packed stadium creates the atmosphere that makes the broadcast product valuable, which is the real reason clubs care so much about filling seats. The paying fan in row 42 isn't just buying a ticket. They're providing free production value for a television product being sold to millions of people who will never set foot in that stadium. Then there's the third pillar, commercial revenue. Shirt sponsorships, stadium naming rights, kit manufacturer deals, and sponsorship logos plastered across every visible surface of the club. A single shirt sponsorship deal for a major European club can be worth tens of millions of dollars a year, paid by a company that isn't buying advertising in the traditional sense. They're buying association. They're renting the emotional loyalty that fans already feel toward the club and hoping some of it rubs off on their brand. This is the same psychological principle that makes a historic church wedding venue feel more meaningful than a hotel ballroom. Borrowed meaning is valuable, and football clubs have more borrowed meaning per square foot than almost any other asset on earth. Now here's where it gets strange. and where the ownership question really opens up. If broadcasting, commercial deals, and a guaranteed league seat generate all this revenue, why do clubs still lose money? The answer is player wages, and the psychology behind why they spiral out of control is worth understanding on its own. Football is one of the only industries where the product being sold is directly tied to a small, specific pool of irreplaceable talent. There are only so many players in the world capable of performing at the highest level, and every club competing for the same trophies is bidding for the same shrinking pool of players. This creates a wage arms race. If one club is willing to pay a superstar $30 million a season to keep him from joining a rival, every other club chasing the same trophies has to match that spending just to stay competitive, whether or not their revenue actually supports it. This is loss aversion playing out at the boardroom level. No owner wants to be the person who let the title slip away because they refused to spend. The fear of falling behind consistently outweighs the discipline of staying profitable. And across the sport, this has produced a system where most clubs spend right up to the edge of what they can survive on, and sometimes past it. Transfer fees compound the problem. When a club buys a player for $100 million, that fee doesn't disappear as an expense in 1 year. It's spread out, amortized over the length of the player's contract, like depreciating a piece of equipment. But if that player gets injured, underperforms, or simply doesn't work out, the club is still carrying that cost on the books for years, watching an asset lose value while paying full price for it. So you end up with an entire industry where nearly every participant is financially fragile, propped up by broadcasting money and commercial deals, while spending recklessly on the one input, players, that could make the difference between a trophy and mid-table mediocrity. It sounds like an unsustainable system. In many ways, it is. And yet, it keeps attracting some of the wealthiest people on the planet, who are eager to buy in anyway. This is the real twist. You assumed people buy football clubs to make money from football. They don't. Increasingly, football clubs are bought as instruments of something else entirely: reputation, influence, and soft power. Consider what owning a major football club actually gives a buyer that a normal investment cannot. Instant global visibility. A weekly audience of hundreds of millions of people across dozens of countries, tuning in specifically to watch something with your name loosely attached to it. For a wealthy individual, a state-linked investment fund, or a corporation looking to reshape how they're perceived internationally, that kind of visibility is nearly impossible to buy through traditional advertising at any price. A football club isn't just a business. It's a permanent, recurring media placement with built-in emotional investment from millions of people who will defend the brand as if it were their own identity. This explains why several major clubs across Europe are now owned by sovereign wealth funds and state-linked investment vehicles from Gulf nations, entities with financial resources so large that traditional profitability metrics barely matter to the decision at all. When a state fund purchases a football club, the return they're chasing usually isn't measured in ticket sales or shirt sponsorships. It's measured in something economists call soft power. The ability to shape international perception, build political relationships, and normalize a country's global image through something as universally beloved as football. Manchester City, purchased by an Abu Dhabi-linked investment group, and Newcastle United, purchased by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, are frequently cited as examples of this exact strategy in action. For a private billionaire owner without state backing, the motivation is often closer to the psychology of owning fine art or a private island. It's a trophy asset. It signals that you've arrived at a level of wealth and status where owning something the entire world watches every weekend is simply part of the lifestyle. The financial losses that would sink almost any other business become, in this context, closer to a very expensive hobby than a failed investment. But there's a real economic case buried underneath all the vanity too, and it deserves just as much attention. Football clubs, unlike almost any other struggling business, sit on an asset that consistently appreciates regardless of on-field performance: the club itself. Broadcasting deals get renegotiated upward almost every cycle as streaming platforms and international markets fight for rights. Real estate around major stadiums appreciates as cities grow, and the pool of people willing to pay a premium to own one of a genuinely limited number of historic, prestigious clubs keeps shrinking every year. Because nobody is building new 100-year-old football institutions with built-in global fan bases from scratch. This is the same scarcity logic that makes a historic downtown building valuable regardless of its condition. There will only ever be one Manchester United, one Real Madrid, one Liverpool. New clubs can be founded, but they cannot buy their way into a century of history, tradition, and inherited loyalty passed down through generations of fans. That inherited loyalty is, in effect, a customer base that renews itself automatically, generation after generation, at almost no marketing cost to the owner. Look at what happened when Liverpool was purchased by Fenway Sports Group in 2010 for roughly $300 million. A club burdened by debt and instability at the time of the sale. Within a decade, that same club was being valued at well over $4 billion. Driven not primarily by trophies, though they did win plenty, but by the steady, compounding growth of broadcasting rights, global commercial deals, and the appreciating rarity of owning one of football's most historic institutions. The football was almost a side effect of an asset that was going to appreciate regardless. This is where the central insight fully reveals itself. A football club isn't really a sports team you buy to compete for trophies. It's a rare, appreciating media and cultural asset that happens to compete for trophies as part of its operations. The same way a hotel happens to rent rooms while its real value sits in the land underneath it. Understanding this also explains some of football's strangest modern controversies. When a group of Europe's biggest clubs attempted to launch a breakaway Super League in 2021, fans reacted with fury, viewing it as a betrayal of sporting merit and open competition. But from a pure asset management perspective, the logic was simple. A closed league with guaranteed participation for a handful of historic clubs would have locked in broadcasting revenue permanently, insulated from the risk of relegation or a bad season, turning football clubs even further into the stable, predictable financial assets their owners increasingly wanted them to be. The backlash collapsed the plan within 48 hours, a rare moment where fan loyalty, the very asset owners depend on, proved powerful enough to overrule the financial logic driving the sport. That tension between football as a community institution and football as a financial asset is the real story underneath every transfer window, every ownership sale, and every controversial new stadium naming rights deal. The fans provide the emotional core that makes the whole system valuable in the first place. The owners are, increasingly, financiers managing a rare and appreciating asset that happens to wear their badge of choice 90 minutes at a time. So the next time you watch a match and see two clubs battling for a trophy, it's worth remembering what's actually happening beneath the surface. The players are competing for glory. The fans are living and dying with every kick. But somewhere above all of it, the ownership is playing an entirely different game. One where wins and losses on the pitch matter less than broadcasting cycles, commercial renewals, and the simple, unshakable scarcity of owning something the whole world tunes in to watch, whether their team wins or not. The trophy was never really the asset. The audience was.